Hey kids, we're picking up today with chapter 3 and the I Survived the Attack of the Grizzlies of 1967. Okay, and I'm going to do what I always do, which is read you the last part of the last page of where we ended, and that way it gives you a little reference so you'll call to memory where we were at. Kevin's eyes grew wide. He'd climbed back up on Mel's lap. Tell us, Pops. Oh, I don't know, Pops said, pretending to change his mind. I don't want to scare you. I am brave, Pops. I'm very, very brave, Kevin exclaimed. Mel cracked a smile and held Kevin a little tighter. What would she do without her loud, bossy pest of a brother? All right, Pops said, but don't say I didn't warn you. Chapter 3. This happened a very long time ago, Pops began. I was maybe 10 years old. Mel looked at her grandfather, whose face was lit up by the firelight. He had white hair, a matching mustache, and skin that was all crinkled like an old map. It was hard to imagine that he'd once been a kid like her, but there was an old photo of him hanging on the wall in the cabin, little boy Pops with his buzz cut and freckles. He was proudly holding up a big trout he'd caught in the lake. I was walking through the woods, Pop went on, not too far from here, maybe a half-mile up the lake. I was heading back to the cabin, whistling some silly tune, swinging my lantern. Not a care in the world until I heard a noise ahead. A noise I'd never heard before. Pops leaned forward. It sounded like this. He clacked his teeth together. Click, clack, click, clack, click, clack. Was it an alligator? Kevin asked. He loved alligators. Most kids had teddy bears. Kevin slept with a stuffed alligator their Aunt Cassie had given him. Shh, Mel said gently. Pops dropped his voice to a whisper. I should have stopped, or at least slowed down, or found a different route. But I just kept walking along like a big dummy, and suddenly, wham! Something whacked my calf. I never felt such pain in my life, not before or since. The animal ran off. I never got a good look at it. I hobbled over to a tree stump, shined my lantern onto my leg. I saw the strangest sight. Dozens of long black needles sticking deep into the meat of my calf. And of course, I realized what creature had attacked me. What was it? Kevin cried. Pops raised his brows at Mel. She had heard this story 100 times before. It was a porcupine, Mel said. A porcupine, Kevin repeated, frowning. He crossed his skinny arms over his t-shirt. Pops, a porcupine is not a scary animal. Who says? Pops boomed. All creatures fear the porcupine. Pops explained that porcupines had more than 30,000 quills on their bodies. The spikes protected them from enemies, bigger animals that wanted to eat them. Each quill was like a small arrow. When a porcupine's attacker tried to take a bite, it wound up stabbed in the snout. And when a porcupine got mad or felt threatened, watch out. With one whack of its tail, a porcupine could deliver dozens of quills deep into its enemy's flesh. That's what happened to Pops. My mother had used pliers to get the quills out, Pops said, wincing. Took her about 3 hours. I fainted once from the pain. Kevin huffed. I hate that porcupine, Pops. Oh, no, Pops said. Don't blame the porcupine. It was just protecting itself. It warned me that click, clack. Was it telling me, I'm here? Please go away. But I was walking around like I am in the forest. I showed no respect. Showing respect in the wild. That was a big thing for Pops, and Mom, too. Remember, Mom had died in a car accident, guys. She was always reminding Mel that Glacier really belonged to the animals. We're just guests here, she liked to say. Both she and Pops worried that the park was getting too crowded, and some people didn't understand how to act when they were hiking or camping. It used to drive Mom crazy when people littered on the trails. Mom's temper could be fiery sometimes, just like Mel's. Excuse me, she'd yell, handing the person their empty soda bottle or Milky Way wrapper. I think you dropped something. Tell another story, Pops, Kevin pleaded. Tell about a wolverine or a wolf or a tiger or an alligator. Pops chuckled. Enough stories for tonight, he said. He sat up slowly, his stiff knees cracked. Remember, Aunt Cassie's coming tomorrow right after breakfast. Yay, Kevin said. Aunt Cassie was Mom's best friend. She always joined them for a few days in Glacier. Last year, Mel would have been counting down the minutes until Aunt Cassie showed up in her little red Volkswagen. The last thing Mel needed now was another reminder of Mom, another reason to cry. Kevin slid off Mel's lap and scampered toward the door. Race you, Pops, he called. Put out the fire, would you, Mel? Pops asked. Then he turned and started limping after Kevin. I'm coming for you, and I'm bringing my porcupine with me. Kevin shrieked happily. They disappeared into the darkness. A minute later, Mel heard the creak and slam of the porch door. Mel doused the fire with water from the lake and used a shovel to pile sand onto the smoldering logs. Even a small ember could drift into the woods and start a fire. There were already more than 10 wildfires burning in the northern parts of the park. So far, firefighters had kept them from spreading, but one windy night could change that, especially in August when the weather was hot and dry. Mel threw on extra sand just to be sure. When the fire was good now, Mel stood for a few minutes, leaning on the shovel. She stared up at the stairs. She could see a million more here than back home in Milwaukee. And that's when she noticed something strange, the total silence. The owls had stopped tooting. The night bugs weren't buzzing. The whole forest seemed to be holding its breath. And then Mel heard a twig snap, leaves rustling, deep, wheezing breaths. The hairs on Mel's arms stood straight up. She wasn't alone. Something was here. Something big. Chapter 4. Mel looked into the woods but couldn't see a thing. It was too dark. She put down the shovel and pushed away her jitters. She had no reason to feel scared. There was no crime in Glacier. Pops didn't even have a lock for the cabin door. Their worst fear was that a skunk would sneak into the house and stink everything up. Well, that'd be bad. Mel took a step toward the cabin, and then she heard it. Grrr. At first she thought it was thunder, but the sky was perfectly clear. Grrr. Mel stopped, her heart pounding. Should she run? Stay still? What was out there? She remembered Grandpa's story about the porcupine. Was this animal trying to scare her away? She swallowed hard and slowly turned to look. She froze. The shape of an enormous animal hovered at the edge of the woods. A second later, it stepped out of the shadows into a pool of moonlight. Mel gasped. The creature had shaggy fur and dark eyes, but it was the hump that rose up between its shoulders that told Mel what it was. A grizzly bear. Mel blinked. It seemed impossible, like it had leaped out of Kevin's imagination, except that Mel could see it. She could hear it, and now a voice in her mind was screaming in panic. Run, run! But somehow, Mel shut out the screaming voice in her brain. She didn't run or shriek, because if she did that, the grizzly would almost definitely come after her and probably attack. Mom had told her that over and over. Grizzly attacks were very rare. No person had ever been killed by a grizzly in Glacier. In fact, most people who came here never saw one, even if they searched for weeks. Still, Mom always wanted Mel to be prepared for anything. And so now, Mel did exactly what Mom had told her to do. As the grizzly slowly rose up onto its hind legs, oh, could you imagine? That'd be so scary. She didn't look it in the eye. She didn't want to make it feel threatened. With her eyes glued to the ground, she walked backward toward the cabin, very slowly. Out of the corner of her eye, Mel saw the grizzly drop back down onto all fours. She felt its eyes drilling into her. Its growls and grunts rumbled her ears. Step by shaking step, Mel kept walking backward. The cabin was only a few yards away, but it seemed like hours before she got there. And then Mel couldn't stop herself. She turned and practically flew up the rickety wooden stairs to the porch. She burst into the cabin and slammed the heavy wooden door shut behind her. Mel, Pops said. He and Kevin were right there on the couch. Pops was reading Kevin his first bedtime story. What happened? Mel didn't say anything. She was looking out at the small square window in the door. It was very dark outside, but there was just enough moonlight to see that there was nothing on the porch. Mel's knees went weak with relief. The bear hadn't followed her. She spun around and locked eyes with Pops. I saw a grizzly, she stammered. Pops put the book down. Where? Right outside. It came out of the woods by the beach, and I thought maybe it followed me. Mel saw the doubt on Pop's face. Are you sure? Pop said. Grizzlies don't bother with people. You know that. Of course I know that, Mel started, but Kevin cut her off. I want to see the grizzly. He leaped off the couch before Mel could stop him. He'd flung open the door. And there it was, standing on the porch. The grizzly was on all fours, staring at her little brother. "Kevin!" Mel snatched her brother and kicked the door shut with her foot. They all stood there for a moment, frozen in shock. Mel couldn't help herself. She held Kevin tight and stepped to the small window. Pops leaned in to look too. The bear was still there. It was pacing back and forth, sniffing the ground. "There's something wrong with that bear," Pops said. "Look how thin it is." Pops was right. The bear was very big, but its light brown coat seemed to hang off its skeleton. Mel could see the outline of its spine poking up through its fur. Kevin reached out and knocked on the window. "Hi, Bear! Hi, Bear!" "No, Kevin, don't!" Mel warned him, grabbing his hand. Too late. The bear looked up at them. It slowly rose onto its hind legs. Then, with the speed of a striking cobra, the enormous bear lunged at the door. Its giant clawed paw came smashing through the window right towards Kevin's face. Hey guys, that's a good place to stop for today. You'll be scared the whole time until we see what happens next week. Hey, I love you guys. I hope that you're doing well, and know that I miss you and that I'm thinking about you. Keep reading.